And then I invite those who would like to join me in the blessing for study of Torah. I've muted you so that we can all say it, but not override each other on the audio. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, la'asok b'divrei Torah. We are just steadily making our way to the finish line on Pirkei Avot. So I will take a little bit of time today to share with you my intentions and vision around what I would like to continue teaching and learning with you. And of course, any others who are moved to join us at this 10:15 time slot on Thursdays in the same Zoom format beginning in January for a winter session called Introduction to Talmud. So I believe if we do this right, we're starting at Pirkei Avot chapter 6, Mishnah 7 today. And on Sefaria, there are 11 Mishnayot in Pirkei Avot. So we won't and they're long. So that probably means that this week we'll get through 7, 8, or 7, 8, 9. And then next week we'll finish. Next. Because next week is Thanksgiving. So we won't finish Pirkei Avot until the first Thursday in December, which is the 1st. So that is almost guaranteed to be our last Pirkei Avot session. We are scheduled to continue learning over Zoom on the 8th and on the 15th. I have in mind a couple of possibilities. One, we could certainly do like a special learning session on the 8th. And I was thinking of asking our facility staff if we could do a kind of fun siyum, which is a Hebrew word for a concluding learning session in person for those who are in town. And I know that we do have people who are not in town or not able to be in town, but in person at the temple at this time on Thursday, the 15th. I thought it might be nice to kind of honor the end of our study with a little like a little coffee and some bagels and some in-person learning, just to greet one another and say hi, how you doing, and kind of mark an end to learning something very significant, having completed all 6 chapters of Pirkei Avot. So you don't have to provide feedback now. I recognize that 15 Jews, 25 opinions. But that's sort of what I'm thinking. If you have feedback on that, and again, apologies for those who live a little bit farther away, can't make an in-person gathering. I understand that, and I'm sorry. But I thought it might be nice to do that on the 15th. So Pirkei Avot study this week, and most likely finish on December 1st. We'll do like a special online study on the 8th. And we'll do a siyum, this is my proposal anyway, in person on the 15th. Then we are on hiatus for a few weeks, for about 3 weeks or so, through the winter break period, and on break on January 5. And then starting on the 12th of January, I'm putting together a curriculum called Introduction to Talmud. This is a little intimidating for me, but I'm excited. I've gotten a lot of feedback from you individually and over the years from other members of the temple that they'd love to have a Talmud study. I think that having learned Mishnah in this deep and considered way sets us up beautifully to dive into the considerably deeper waters of the Talmud. Rather than starting with a tractate and reading sequentially, which is indeed a meaningful endeavor, but it can really be very thorny. And there will be times when we will feel obligated to read just because it's the next page, but the subject matter will be, let us say, not the most effervescent. I would rather do 5 discrete lessons in Talmud that illustrate the subject matter, the style, and the mechanics of Talmudic discourse. Because, again, I think if you've been studying Mishnah for as long as most of us have, you have an excellent grounding to go into Talmud. But Talmud does both speak in the language of the Mishnaic period and also is very discursive in the later rabbinic forms of discourse of the Amoraim, which is the next generation of sages after the Tanaim, the Mishnaic sages. So Talmud is both same and different from Mishnah. So I hope you'll be excited to tackle some Talmud. It's an introductory course, which means that, again, it's just intended to be a kind of self-contained preamble to whatever comes next. If it takes off the way I hope it does, we can continue it into and throughout the spring, taking a hiatus for Purim and Pesach, which are very busy times for me and the temple in terms of holiday preparations. But I think it would be really nice to give this a go. So again, more to come, but I'm teasing out now an evolving vision of where our study is going to go. Thoughts, questions, comments just for now? Do you like this? Does this sound appealing? Barbara asked, will it be the same as I did years back? I don't know what that means, Barbara. I've never taught Talmud at WRT before. I've taught a lot of material, but I've actually never taught Talmud. So 20 years here, and it would be a first for me.
You're not going to start with the laws of purity, are you?
I am not.
Thank you.
No, I'm not. I haven't decided where to start, but I think lesson 1 may actually be the very first page of Talmud. Because, as was it Maria von Trapp says, let's start at the very beginning. Okay, good. Well, hearing no objections, I'll take that as a resounding endorsement. Yes, a little digital hand clap. Thank you, Barbara. Okay.
I seem to remember that it was in person a long time ago. And we went on and on and on about the rules of Shabbat and when Shabbat came in.
Yeah, we were actually, that was still Mishnah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we did do some Mishnah on Shabbat, but I've never actually done Gemara, which is the Talmudic stratum or layer on top of the Mishnaic layer.
Okay, count me in.
Awesome, brilliant. Okay, all right. So wonderful. So now we're going to look at Pirkei Avot, chapter 6. Mishnah, what did we say? 7 is where we're up to today. So last week we did this long list of character traits, attributes, and behaviors that are associated with the person who devotes himself. I think we can extrapolate out and say herself as well, though the rabbis would have had him in mind, to a life of Torah. And so we pick that up here with Mishnah 7. So again, Hebrew is just not that hard if you have the bravery to look at it. So Gedolah Torah is big. Gadol is big. So Gedolah Torah is great. Shehi notenet chayim, because it gives life. Words that you may know, life, of course, you know. Le'oseha, to the one who performs it or practices it, they say. Ba'olam hazeh, in the here and now. Uva'olam haba, and in the hereafter. Or as is customarily translated and translated below, in this world and in the world to come. So this is the thesis statement of Pirkei Avot, chapter 6, Mishnah 7. Torah is great, or gadol, or feminine form of gadol, which is gidolah, in that, shehi, notenet chayim le'oseha, in that it gives life to the one who practices it, or follows it, or does it, ba'olam hazeh, in this world, and in the hereafter. And because this requires a little bit of clarification around which subject corresponds to which object, or how does the syntax function here. It does not mean that one practices it in this world and in the world to come, or in the here and now and in the hereafter. It means that the reward of Torah, giving life, which is fascinating, right? Notenet chayim. Torah gives life to the one who practices it, both in this world and in the next. Torah gives life in this world and the next. Now, what exactly that means, however, is this just a nice poetic phrase? Can we extrapolate more out of this notion of Torah is great because it gives life to the one who practices it, or those who practice it? It's actually plural. Le'oseha, with the yud form, means that it's a plural. From osim, those plural who do it. So before we get into the proof texting, all of which comes from chapters 4, 3, and 1 of the Book of Proverbs, which we're actually going to look at length. We're going to do a lot of deep proof texting on this one. Does anyone have any conjecture around what is meant that Torah gives life? Clearly, it's not a medical statement. So, Alan, do you want to chime in here?
Well, it's my interpretation to mean quality of life, not necessarily length of life, number of years, because certainly very knowledgeable and righteous people, unfortunately, have short-term lives.
Right.
But the quality of the life term that's given to you is enhanced.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alan. Joe Levine. Oh, unmute yourself kindly. Now you're still muted.
Okay.
But there you go. We got you.
I interpreted that to mean it gives life meaning and understanding.
And that is a distinctly 21st century Jewish perspective, by the way, in that, my dear friend, Larry Hoffman, Rabbi Larry Hoffman, who is, I think, the greatest living exponent of the meaning of Jewish life and Jewish culture, Jewish civilization, Judaism, in the non-Orthodox world today. I'll have the great privilege of being on a bima with Larry tomorrow night, as we are both participating, he in an extended role and I in an extremely compact role, at the installation Shabbat service of Rabbi Daniel Reeser at Temple Beth Shalom in Hastings. All are invited, by the way. Not that I would ask you to come to a Shabbat service other than the one at your home shul of WRT. Rabbi Bacon and our cantorial intern Isaac Sanadasor are leading services and holding down the fort here at WRT tomorrow evening. I and Cantor Kleiman, Cantor Rodnizky, Rabbi Levy actually will all be present for Rabbi Reeser's installation in Hastings tomorrow night at, I believe the service is at 6:30, but don't quote me. That's at Temple Beth Shalom in Hastings. You're welcome to come if you would like to honor Rabbi Reeser in his new role. Larry Hoffman says that the Jewish project of American Jews has evolved and transformed over the course of 3 successive generations. So the generation of, let us say, my grandparents, the greatest generation, their main Jewish project, Hoffman claims, was Jewish survival. And that was demonstrated at several times in the most active years of the greatest generation in among American Jewry. Thank you. Arlene says the service is at 7:30. Okay, I appreciate that. I don't know. You have to go on the website of Temple Beth Shalom. I'm going over there early, so it's a moot point. Jewish survival, right? So this was the generation that had to grapple with the devastating impact of the Holocaust on the one hand, and also the extraordinary, dramatic, forever civilization-altering impact of the foundation of the State of Israel. So 2 massive events in all of Jewish history, all of Jewish civilization, in very short succession, the Holocaust and the foundation of the State of Israel, which are linked, but not in a simple causal way, by the way, and that's a rabbit hole we don't need to go down, were the defining events of that generation's Judaism, and therefore the defining project was one of survival. For their children, their descendants, that is to say, the baby boomer generation, of whom we have a great number in the room right now, the main, that is those who were born between 46 and 64, the main Jewish project, Hoffman claims, is educating the next generation, providing a Jewish education for their children. And that synagogues from this period, synagogues that were built between 46 and 64, actually often physicalize this commitment by having huge religious school wings. And if they have large sanctuaries, that's only because it was a holdover from the previous generation, that the religious school became the primary MO and driver of affiliation in American synagogue life in the baby boomer generation. And Hoffman goes on from there, and I promise, Joe, this connects to your comment, to suggest that the successive generations post-baby boomers, that is to say Gen X, that's my generation, 65 to 81, I think, born in 1965 to 1981, so I'm born in 73, so I'm right in the middle. Gen X and the generation after us, who are the millennials, and even the newest generation after the millennials, sometimes called Gen Z or post-millennial. Some say there's a Gen Y. I think right now the common term is millennial. These generations are their main Jewish project, at least in American non-Orthodox Jewry, is making lives of meaning. And if they have a connection to Judaism at all, which is an if, not a guarantee, Judaism is largely viewed as one of several pieces of equipment in the toolbox of life to construct meaning, to find meaning, whatever that may mean. So it is interesting, Joe, to hear you seeing the framework of meaning reflected in an ancient text, where this is not a word that probably would have been used by Jews in Mishnaic antiquity, right? For them, they would not have said being Jewish is about constructing a life of meaning. That was not the kind of governing concept of the rabbinic project of creating rabbinic Judaism. But it is our project. It's very much, I think, the project that I believe is most important for the congregation that I serve today, in a world where, at least for my generation and those who come after us, even acknowledging rising anti-Semitism, which is abundantly evident and very disturbing, even acknowledging the challenges to the State of Israel, which, although coming up on its 75th anniversary of independent statehood, continues to present, at least to most Jews who care about Israel, as under threat, under siege, precarious, imperiled. And I don't just mean, I'm not talking about the election results, I'm talking about its physical security. I am not sure that is true anymore, by the way. I think that one can make an opposite argument, that Israel's strength and power makes it not perhaps inoculated against existential threats, especially with a nuclearized Iran looming. I would simply suggest that the idea of Israel's survival is no longer a question mark. It's a fact on the ground and has been for some time, and the Arab world knows this too. Other than Iran, the rest of the Arab world has gotten in line with the idea that we're not going to get rid of the Jewish state. So survival, therefore, is no longer the norm of the Jewish conversation in the non-Orthodox world, I want to qualify, that speaks to my generation and the generation after me. The norm that speaks to us is, what does it mean to create a life of meaning, and how can Judaism be a primary tool in constructing it? Thank you for this long discourse, but I think it's really important because we're talking about the first line in Pirkei Avot that says, the Torah gives life to those who practice it. Well, what does that mean? Okay, lots of thoughts, comments. Russell, why don't you chime in next?
Thank you very much. I know I'm sort of a broken record on this subject, a phrase, by the way, that certain millennials do not understand. But I am
We still
fascinated.
understand it even if we've never actually had a broken record.
Well, maybe they're talking about Olympic records, but I am fascinated with the use of the word life in the Torah. We begin in Genesis with God breathing life into Adam. And in Deuteronomy, we learn that choose life if you would live. Life is the choices that you make. There's something in that journey between the beginning of Genesis and the end of Deuteronomy that has transformed the idea of life and what it means to live. So when this phrase says that Torah gives life to our world and to the world to come, and as I mentioned in the chat, I'm confused as to what the world to come means, whether that means future generations or whether it means the afterlife, both of which I think have unique resonance for Judaism. But to me, what that is saying is that Torah is giving us a life of choices and is showing us the direction and how to make those choices.
Lovely. Thank you for that drush. Beautiful. Mom, Dad, your mic is next to be unmuted, please.
The prayer that comes to my mind is the one that's recited as we return the Torah to the Ark. Perhaps you could chant it, Eitayim hi,
Right.
Azikim bo, it's a tree of life to those who hold fast to it. And that's a metaphor that comes up many, many times. But it seems to me that somehow the notion of Torah being the tree of life and this phrase from Mishnah are linked in a way that can't be overlooked.
Well, not that it surprises me, but it is true to say now you're thinking like a rabbi, because you hit the nail on the head in terms of how the rabbis are going to proof text the claim. The claim that they make that Torah gives life, that's the claim. The proof text is that text. So we're actually going to see how they do that and where they get that from in the Tanakh, and what their read on the Book of Proverbs is that allows them to underscore their claim. So lovely, great. Michelle Braun.
Probably more directed at your comments than at this specific text. But I understand that the group that I think you do work with, the Institute for Jewish Spirituality or something along those.
Correct, IJS.
Has developed and is running television advertisements during some NFL games that intended specifically to not say stop being anti-Semitic, but in fact, hey, this is some of the good stuff about Judaism.
I love that. I don't watch much football other than the Super Bowl, so maybe that you finally incentivized me to watch football, which is pretty hilarious.
Well, I don't want to go that far. It's through it may not be available to you. They use some selective
different markets.
And it was during a 49er game, so if you're not in California or they selected a market.
That's amazing.
But they said, and it's going to like what was in airports and bars and that sort of thing. But it's just
I like the IJS very much, and this makes me like them even more. I think that's awesome. I really think the best response to anti-Semitism is philo-Semitism. Like, let's get Semitic together. Anti-Semitism is not a particularly meaningful way of engaging with Jewish life. It's a major driver. People get worked up. They want to come to their temples. But it's very much kind of a victim bunker mentality. And I don't believe that it has the sustaining power, nor does it help people get in touch with the beauty and the richness of our tradition. So it's not without value to stand up and combat anti-Semitism. It's just, again, I think that it's a setting sun. Beautiful. Michelle put the link in the chat box for all of us to enjoy. I will send you one other link. I'll make sure to put it in the chat window before the end of our session today. The URJ, the Union for Reform Judaism, so that's the organizing umbrella body for all American, Canadian, North American Reform Jewish congregations. The president, the director, the head of which is Rabbi Rick Jacobs, of course, our emeritus. Put out a newsletter this week. They do every week, and included in it a video of my favorite high holiday sermon from this past high holidays from just a couple months ago, by my dearest friend, Rabbi Alexis Burke, who is my HUC classmate, study partner, and bestie in the rabbinate, and just one of the great human beings I know. She is the rabbi of Temple Solel in Cardiff by the Sea, which is a suburb just north of San Diego. And she gave a really great Rosh Hashanah morning sermon on the meaning of belonging to synagogues today. It's must-see TV. It's really funny, really provocative, and would make for a great conversation. Maybe that's what we'll do on the 8th. It would make for a really interesting kind of like coda to everything we've been studying in Pirkei Avot, believe it or not. At least I see how it connects. Okay, so we're going to go into the Book of Proverbs next. I want to call up Pirkei Avot, show us how it is used, how several verses from Proverbs are used to proof text, but then we're going to actually look at the Book of Proverbs. So this is our text. So as it is said, that's always the introduction to, now we're going to bring in a biblical text, which will enforce or reinforce the claim. The claim, of course, being the first line, great is Torah, for it gives life to those who practice it in this world and in the world to come. As it is said, or in the Hebrew, shene'emar, as it is said, from Proverbs chapter 4, for they are life unto those that find them, and health to all their flesh. The pronouns make this challenging to understand without the Book of Proverbs by your side. And again, whenever you're studying rabbinic text, you do need a Tanakh. You need a Hebrew Bible in translation is fine by your side, so that you understand how the proof texts are being used, what the context is, and what the content is. We're going to look at that. And it says, so that's proof text number 1. They are life unto those that find them, and health to all their flesh. What does that mean? It's really open-ended until you see how it functions. And it says, it, meaning scripture, always, it is always the Hebrew Bible. It will be a cure for your navel and marrow for your bones. Same book of the Hebrew Bible, Proverbs, chapter 3, verse 8. And it says, queuing up my dad, it is a tree of life, or she is a tree of life. Torah feminized. Torah is a noun that, like all nouns in Hebrew, is gendered. So Torah, usually words ending in the the hey suffix, are feminine. That doesn't mean that Torah is gendered the way a person or a biological entity is gendered. It simply means that Hebrew is one of many, many languages, including the Romance languages, that require the gendering of its nouns, and verbs have to be in agreement in gender and in number. Torah is a feminine noun, that's all. She is a tree of life to those that grasp her, or we often say those who hold her fast, it fast. And all who cling to her find happiness, or as they translate here, whoever holds on to her is happy. Same chapter, verse 18. And it says, so we're going on like a proof texting spree. The rabbis are building what I would call a homily. This is highly sermonic in that they are engaging in rhetoric. Rhetoric is that form or those forms of speech that are constructed so as to be persuasive. So rhetoric is a genre of public speaking or writing that is intended to persuade. So this is a form of rhetoric whose persuasive mechanism, the mechanic of this, is to amplify proof texts one after the other, and thereby strengthen one's case. One should always keep in mind as well that when the rabbis are engaging in proof texting, this is their way of saying, don't take my word for it, the claim I've made in line 1, again, great is Torah, for it gives life to those who practice it, both in this realm and in the next realm. Take it from the word of God. But if that is your baseline understanding of the nature of scripture, the nature of Tanakh, of the Hebrew Bible, it's as if the rabbis are saying, don't take my word for it, take God's word for it. This is God's own promise of what Torah provides. We'll get to the inner workings when we look at Proverbs. So, and it says, for they are a graceful wreath upon your head, a necklace about your throat. You notice that we don't yet actually have the word Torah in any of these proof texts from Proverbs. It's all it or she. It's all pronouns. And we are going to have to be the judge of whether or not Proverbs actually means what the rabbis are saying it means. Does the book of Proverbs really mean that these are the benefits that accrue to one who studies or practices Torah? We shall see. So next claim is, they are a graceful wreath upon your head, a necklace about your throat. We don't know what they refers to yet, but we will. That's from Proverbs 1, verse 9. And it says, she will adorn your head with a graceful wreath, crown you with a glorious diadem, or a gemstone, from chapter 4, verse 9. So all of this language of ornamental garments and I guess, ornamentation. And it says, in her right hand is length of days, in her left, meaning her left hand, riches and honor. Again, we still don't know who these pronouns, what is the antecedent? All of this will become important. Chapter 3, verse 1. And it says, for they will bestow on you length of days, years of life, and peace. Chapter 3, verse 2. All right, so all of these things are clearly positive. Like, all of these things are promises, but none of them actually says Torah. They all just say it, they, her, she. So what's going on here? Well, in order to get that, what we need to do is bring up the book of Proverbs. So I have actually done that for us, and here it is. So the book of Proverbs is part of the Hebrew Bible, or Tanakh, known as the Ketuvim, or the Ketuvim, the writings. Just a quick basic reintroduction to Hebrew scripture, or Tanakh, or Jewish Bible, or Hebrew Bible, all of these words being interchangeable. The word Tanakh, which is the preferred nomenclature for this text, is an acronym. Taf, or the T of Tanakh, is Torah, which are the first 5 books of Moses. The first 5 books of the Tanakh are the 5 books of Moses: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, better known as Torah. The Nun, the N of Tanakh, is the Nevi'im, which means the prophets. And those are both the books that are named for the prophet who is purported to be the author of said book. The 3 major prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, and the minor prophets. And if you want to see this, by the way, you just go into Sepharia. Look at how easy it is to find this. So this is Sepharia. When you call up Sepharia, when you go to sepharia.org, it presents you with this menu of its library of texts. So you're walking into a virtual library, and they've done such wonderful work to make this accessible. I mean, even the beautiful feature here, you click the Aleph and all of a sudden you've got it all in Hebrew. You click the letter A in Roman character, you're back to English. And many of these texts, you can actually display Hebrew, English side by side. So when you want to look at the Tanakh, you just click on Tanakh, and you have the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, as you can see here, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. And please stop me if the texts aren't showing up on my screen. All of this is working through the screen share, correct? Great. Then you've got the prophets, or the Nevi'im. So you've got Joshua, Judges, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings. Those 1st and 2nd divisions did not exist in the time of the authoring of these books. They are simply convenient ways of breaking down very, very large volumes that could not have been contained on a single parchment in antiquity into smaller, more manageable, physically more manageable documents. 1st and 2nd Kings, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, the 3 major prophets, and then the 12 minors. Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. So few kids these days named Habakkuk. What a shame. They just published the most popular names again, and the number 1 boy's name is Noah, which I think is pretty cool. Lots of biblical names now. You'll have to Google it. Like, look up top children's names 2022. It was just published last week, and I forget what the girl's name is. I think that it's something like, you know, Fountain. No, I don't know. It's a very millennial name.
Noah's wife.
Noah's wife. Yeah, the unnamed but no less important Mrs. Noah. Yeah, there are a bunch of names that are very au courant, and then there are names that have come back into fashion. You know, we have all these kids running around our religious school and our preschool that have all these old lady names. I just met a woman, a 35-year-old, who has a 15-month-old named Edith. Yeah, if you meet an Edith, she's either under 8 or over 80. Nobody seems to be naming their kids Karen these days. No surprise. Karen, Barbara, those names are very out. They're very baby boomer names, at least among Jews, are very out because most of the baby boomer grandparents are still alive, thank God. And most Ashkenazi Jews in America name their kids after the dead. So you've got Max, and I've got kids named Irving. Yeah, Joe?
I had a pair of cousins, and both girls. They were both Radio City Rockettes. They were named Gladys and Edith.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. Judy?
Mo Rocca has a wonderful obituary on names, and one of the facts that he said is that names like Morris and Irving and Seymour used to be Christian names.
That's right.
Early in the century, but once the Jews took them on, they were removed from the wasp or the whatever. That's
right. Instead of going from, you know, Yitzchak or Yitzi or Yitz in the old country, they named, you know, the first generation of Jewish Americans, the immigrant generation, named their kids assimilationist names, right? So instead of naming their kids Yitzchak after grandpa, they would name them Irving or Isidore. All of these names became associated with Jewish. You know, my late grandfather, not great grandpa, my dad's dad was Morris, Mo. My Hebrew name is Moshe. Okay, so then you have the writings, which is the kaf of Tanakh is writings, and that's Psalms, and Proverbs is part of the Ketuvim section. It also includes the scrolls, Ruth, Ecclesiastes, Esther, etc., and ends with Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, Chronicles, and 2nd Chronicles. So anyway, I love that Safari makes it so easy. So if you want to call up Proverbs, all you do is you go to the writings, you click Proverbs, and you click the chapter. Boom, it's there. It's easy. All right, so this is Proverbs. And as I said before, if you want the bilingual display, all you do is click the little thing up here that has the Roman A next to the Hebrew Aleph. Boom, and you can choose the format. It's so cool. I can switch to Hebrew. I can enlarge the font. There, I just enlarge the font. And then I can click the language key. Boom. Look at that. So easy. All right. So the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. Mishlei Shlomo ben David, melech Yisrael. For learning wisdom and discipline, for understanding words of discernment, for acquiring the discipline for success, righteousness, justice, and equity, for endowing the simple with shrewdness, the young with knowledge and foresight. The wise man hearing them will gain more wisdom. The discerning man will learn to be adroit. For understanding proverb and epigram, the words of the wise and their riddles. Okay, so this is all the preamble, the first 8 verses. You have the first line, which is basically just the title. Here are the Proverbs of Shlomo, the king of Israel, son of David. For the Hebrew preposition is the lamed of la da'at, which literally means to know or to acquire chokhmah, which means wisdom, musar. Musar means discipline. It is interpreted in later rabbinic text and tradition to mean loosely character development. Rabbi Sasha Bacon, our newest member of the clergy team, our assistant rabbi, teaches a monthly Musar class, which I highly commend to you. It's over Zoom. You'd have to just be a bit of a glutton for Jewish learning because it takes place monthly on Thursdays. But it's really wonderful, and she's a wonderful teacher. And it's specific Jewish study, Jewish text study, from the period of the medieval period to the early modern era, rabbinic writing on the subject of what it means to be a person of character. So it is ethical wisdom specifically geared toward regulating and developing the inner life, and not so much about how one interacts with God and the Jewish people and the rest of the world. It's largely a person's business within him or herself. That's Musar. So it seems to me that the right way to read this, because we're heavy on pronouns and nouns and prepositions and light on verbs, I would extrapolate, or interpolate might be the better word, read into what I think the text is saying. Here are the Proverbs, the wisdom statements of King Solomon, the son of David, which serve the purpose of, or to the end that, for the purpose of acquiring wisdom and self-discipline, for understanding words of wisdom. Lehavin imre bina, which is tautological. It's redundant. Lehavin is the word that means to understand, and bina means understanding. So literally to understand words of understanding. So the purpose of Proverbs is the acquisition of wisdom. Full stop. Reading on. Also, lakachat, to the end that one will acquire musar haskel, tzedek, so that one will acquire the discipline of, haskel is from seichel, which means common sense, we say, a different kind of wisdom. Tzedek, for doing right and just. Umesharim, and what is straight. From like yashar koach, yashar means go straight. In Israel, if you want to give somebody directions, just ask for directions in Israel, and someone will say yashar, 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 go straight, go straight, go straight, which means go straight for 3 blocks. Yamin, small, make a right, make a left, and then you're there. Like Israelis are notoriously laconic, very, very terse when they give directions. Yashar, 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 yamin, small, and there you're there. So the Proverbs serve the purpose. King Solomon's Proverbs are about acquiring wisdom, discipline, understanding. I would say common sense, or the discipline of common sense. I don't like success. Righteousness, justice, and being straight. straightforward or upright. Latet, okay, for endowing liftayim, the ptayim are the simple-minded, or ma, to make the simple-minded shrewd, sharp, both for the youth, da'at umizima, knowledge and foresight. Okay? Yishma hacham, when the wise man hears them, meaning these proverbs that King Solomon is dispensing, v'yosef lekach, he will, literally his portion will increase. Yosef, including the name Joseph, means to grow. Lekach is a word that means an inheritance or a holding. Lakach means to hold on or take something. So that which he takes increases. Vinavon, the one who has understanding already, tachbulot yikneh, he will learn to become even more adept or adroit. These are for the purpose of understanding proverbs and wise sayings or epigrams, the words of the wise, v'chidotam, and their riddles. In other words, so what Solomon, or the author who presents himself as King Solomon, because almost everyone believes these are not writings of Solomon, that's just a traditional ascription, a pious ascription, but a pious fiction. The whole point of Proverbs is to help people become wise, wiser, savvier, more righteous, more just, and of better character. And now we get into the actual content. So all of those 6 verses are just preamble. Like, this is, if you take these maxims, these axioms to heart, you will grow in wisdom. Full stop. And what is wisdom? Yirat Adonai Reshit Da'at. All right, one of the most important phrases, this whole verse is really important to the rabbis. I would say this is one of the most quoted verses in all of rabbinic literature, in all of the Mishnah and the Talmud, and on into the Midrash and the codes. The rabbis constantly return to this verse from Proverbs. The fear of the Lord, Yirat Adonai, or the reverence for the Lord, not like cowering in a corner fear, but more bowing down in awe fear. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of da'at, knowledge. Though in the mystical tradition, da'at doesn't mean the knowledge that you can get from books. Da'at means experiential knowledge of God, which is usually best translated as the word awareness. So awe is the cornerstone, or to use a different metaphor, like the seed, the germ cell of awareness of God. To comport oneself in a posture of awe and reverence in the face of Yahweh, of Adonai, is the beginning of awareness or of wisdom. Chochma umusar evilim bazu. Whereas, so there's a stop there, I would say, whereas fools are the evilim, despise or spurn wisdom and discipline. So if you want to be wise, take these maxims to heart, beginning with the fear of God, or the reverence for God. If you spurn them, you're a fool, or a fool is one who spurns them. We're getting to one of the quotables, but I think we can stop here. So the framework for the entire book of Proverbs, it's all about the acquisition of wisdom and the relationship between wisdom, knowledge, awareness of God. There's wisdom and knowledge and the deeper awareness of standing in the presence of God. That's the first master statement that one needs to understand about the book of Proverbs. Then when you get into how the rabbis are using this, they are creating meaning out of a simple one-to-one assumed correlation between the word that comes up more often than any other in the book of Proverbs, which is chokhmah. You probably have heard this, like a chacham. A chacham is a wise person in Judaism. It's Hebrew through the Yiddish pronunciation, the Ashkenazi pronunciation, the chacham. Or chokhmah is wisdom. And you can see, by the way, there are lots of words that are not quite synonyms, but they all revolve around a constellation of similar meaning. So you've got chokhmah, wisdom, you've got bina, understanding, you've got da'at, which is knowledge, but generally not book knowledge, awareness. You've got sechel, which is common sense wisdom in Jewish, right? This, like the boy is smart, but he lacks sechel, right? He has a PhD from Harvard, but he put all of his investments in Bitcoin. I don't know, lacks sechel. And finally, the one that doesn't appear to correlate, but is used in association with these other qualities is musar, which generally has come to mean character development. So we're not just talking about book knowledge, again, learning. We're going well beyond learning and the cultivation of intellect to something that the Book of Proverbs, and by extension, the rabbis, esteem above book learning, above the growth of the intellect, which is character. And the two are linked, right? That the specific learning that is conveyed through the study of Torah, and perhaps more directly, at least according to the claim that is made in the beginning of the Book of Proverbs, that if you just study this book of Proverbs, it will serve the same function as Torah writ large, which is that you will grow in not only intellectual capacity, but you will grow spiritually and ethically. So you won't just become a big brain box. You won't just be learned, you will be wise, you will be disciplined, you will be upright, you will have seichel. All right, so that's what's really being discussed here. And the simple correlation that the rabbis want to propose is that Torah is a stand-in for chokhmah and vice versa. So that when the Book of Proverbs talks about wisdom, read Torah instead. It is a perfectly acceptable. It's like the quality that is extolled in the Book of Proverbs, which is this quality of wisdom. The rabbis say there is no difference between the word wisdom as it is used in the Book of Proverbs and what we call Torah and the life of Torah. I'm going to fully stop there and ask for your comments, questions, and especially I want to check in with you to make sure that everything I've just presented makes sense. Because now we have enough of a grounding, I think, to look at the specific proof texts, knowing this and seeing how they function in this text. Questions, thoughts, comments? Barbara.
In more modern Hebrew, a chachmalog is somebody who thinks that they're smart.
I love that. I did not know that phrase, a chachmalog. So it's not a term of praise.
Smarty pants.
Smarty
Right.
pants. I love it. It's a chachmalog. I love it. I'll use it. Thank you, Barbara. Great. Other thoughts, comments, questions? All right. So now what we can do is actually toggle back and forth between Proverbs and the Tanakh and the Pirkei Avot. And again, just because I'm so very fond of how Sefaria works, great is Torah, for it gives life to those who practice it in this world and in the world to come. That's the only claim that this Mishnah makes. Everything else is proof text. But the beauty and the richness is all in the proof text. So let's look at the first one. As it is said, for they are life unto those that find them and health to all their flesh. Now, all you need to do if you're using Sefaria is click on the proof text citation here. Boom. And you get a side-by-side window. How cool is that? That brings up Proverbs for you. I mean, amazing. Guys who did this are not just great Jewish teachers. They're brilliant with the technology. So now we're looking at chapter 4. And we can just go back to, let's say, verse 20, which is periodically the narrator's voice will kind of interject in the Book of Proverbs with a direct address. Beni, my son. Again, the male address is probably exactly what was had in mind, though you can translate Beni as my child, gender neutrally, and that is a legitimate translation. My child, lidvarai hakshiva. Pay attention, pay close attention to my words, to my speech. Listen, hakshiv, it's more than just listen. It's listen intently, pay attention. La'amarai, hat oznecha. So listen to my son, to my words, pay attention, to my speech, give ear. That's the somewhat Yoda-esque inverted syntax of what's written here. My child, pay attention to my words, give ear to my speech, incline your ear to my words. Do not lose sight of them. So now, by the way, we had ears in the first verse, in verse 20. In verse 21, eyes. Take in my words with the intention of all of your senses of perception, your auditory perception, your ocular, your visual perception. Do not lose sight of them. Keep them in your mind. The word for mind here is livavcha, this word, which you thought meant heart, right? Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, you shall love Adonai your God, b'chol livavcha, with all your heart. But in biblical times, the livav, or the heart, was actually the seat of intellectual capacity, of thought. Therefore, the better translation for the heart is actually the mind. So this is a good translation. Protect them inside, in the very center of your mind. Ki chayim hem, they are life. This is the magic key that unlocks the passage from Avot that we're studying today. Lo and behold, God uses the word life. We're saying God as the putative author of all scripture, of Tanakh. They are life, lemotzehem, these words of wisdom. And it's not, again, it's not just Solomon's advice. This is Torah writ large, what I would call accrued or accumulated Jewish wisdom. They are life to those who find them, and to all, every body, ulechol besaro, to every living body, marpeh. They are healing. They are restorative. They are a doctor for the soul, or for the body. But this is what the rabbis need mechanically to make their drush, to make their interpretive message here work, or rhetoric, their persuasive speech, work properly. If the claim is that Torah gives life to those who practice it, how, the rabbis are asking, how can we prove that from scripture? Lo and behold, you look in the book of Proverbs, and here's a line: the words of wisdom, where wisdom means Torah, are life. There it is. They are a balm, or a healing source for the body. More than all you guard your mind, for it is the source of life. It's a fascinating text. And then it goes on from there. So that's proof text number 1. Proof text number 2, and then you can just, by the way, close that. Click here. Proof text number 2. Oh, it's not linked. That's not good. They got to fix that. Okay, so you just scroll up. What does it say? 318. Let's see how 318 works. Okay, this is the one we know. Let's read the whole passage, because it's going to be proof texted more than once, more than one verse. Happy is the man who finds wisdom, the man who attains understanding. Her value in trade is better than silver. Her does not refer to the man. Her refers to wisdom. Wisdom is personified as a she. Okay, it's almost like you find a good wife, you find a personified wisdom dressed as a woman. This is not that alien to us. I mean, liberty is usually dressed as a woman. In Catholic church art and iconography and sculptuary, the church herself is dressed like a woman.
The goddess Athena.
What's that?
The goddess Athena.
The goddess Athena is the goddess, right, is wisdom personified.
Statue of Liberty.
The Statue of Liberty, exactly. And by the way, Athena is, I think, a meaningful analog or reference point here, because many people believe that the Book of Proverbs is one of a handful of texts in the Tanakh that was deeply influenced by early Greek philosophy or early Greek wisdom literature. Almost everybody who studies this points out dramatic and precise similarities between Proverbs, the Book of Job, and a few other texts in the Tanakh that resemble pre-biblical, not pre-biblical, but pre-Christian Greek philosophical writing. So happy the one who finds wisdom, the man who attains understanding. Her value, meaning wisdom, but remember, for the rabbis, wisdom is always a direct substitute for Torah. Just gonna ask that whoever's unmuted, mute yourself, please. Her value in trade is better than silver. Her yield is greater than gold. She is more precious than rubies. All of your goods cannot equal her. Some of you may remember this line from the prayer book. She is more precious than rubies. No treasure can match her or match it. And we say these verses, the rabbis actually stuck a anthology, a patchwork quilt of these verses in the Torah service, in the prayer book. In the Orthodox, this isn't like some reform, creative writing project. The rabbis took these verses from Proverbs about chokhmah, about wisdom, and they threaded them, they wove them into the liturgy. Liturgy just means a sequence of prayers. The prayer book, Friday night, Kabbalat Shabbat, bunch of Psalms and Rabbinic writings, it's a liturgy. The Haggadah is a liturgy for Pesach. The three blessings you say at the Shabbat table, candles, Kiddush over the wine, and Challah, that's a liturgy. Havdalah is a 5-minute liturgy. Kol Nidre is a liturgy. So the liturgy for the taking out and putting back of the Torah is woven out of verses from the Book of Proverbs. So that as we're putting the Torah back in the ark, we're saying the next few verses. In her right hand is length of days, in her left riches and honor. That actually is not part of the Torah service, but this one is. Dirachecha, darchei noam v'chol netivoteha shalom. Eitz chayim hi, eitz chayim, eitz chayim hi. Eitz chayim hi lamachazikim ba v'tomcheha meushar. Dirachecha, they inverted the order. Darchei noam v'chol netivoteha shalom. She is a tree of life to those who grasp her. Whoever holds on to her is happy. Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. I know you know these verses if you've spent any time in shul at a Torah service, but you may not have known where they come from. And even though the Book of Proverbs never uses the word Torah to say that's the antecedent for all of these pronouns, it is the word chokhmah, wisdom. And wisdom, to the rabbis, is interchangeable with the word Torah. Okay, I hope you're following me still. I'm doing my best with a complicated textual exegesis. Mom and Dad, you're the next hand to be acknowledged, please.
Surely, as a doctor, you can't be surprised that I want to zero in on a cure for your navel and marrow to your bones. And I just want you to cite your dear friend who recently died, Julie Powell, who in her book on Julie and Julia, when she had a recipe that called for bone marrow, and she had to buy marrow bones. And she commented while trying to crack open these bones to get in the marrow, it says, this is as deep as it gets in life, in your body, in cooking, but there is nothing deeper than the marrow, the internal. And I guess in the same sense, the navel was seen to be a one-way inside street. It wasn't like your digestive tract that's connected to two ends, or your breathing that goes in and out. Your navel, I'm postulating, was the circuit to your innermost innards.
Love
So-
that. Love that. And thanks for quoting Julie Powell. May her memory be for a blessing. My college friend and a great Scrabble player, by the way. This is the section. So the passage begins, do not be wise in your own eyes. In other words, don't you come up with what you think Chokhmah is. We have a way of knowing what Chokhmah is. It's the study of Torah. That's the rabbinic interpretation of this. Fear the Lord and shun evil. Again, how do you fear the Lord? The discipline of learning Torah. It will be a cure for your body, a tonic for your bones, which I love, but I really like the way they translated it over here. Sorry, lots of tab flipping on the computer. It will be a cure for your navel and marrow for your bones. I love that. I love, Dad, if I were retranslating along the lines that you have proposed, it would be, it will reach you in the innermost place of your body, right? It will really, we would use the Yiddish word in the kishkas, which are like your guts, right? Something that resides at the kishkas level. That's where Torah enters. And again, I think that what's being suggested here through this poetic imagery, and poetry is it's an art of making meaning out of, I would say it's a dialogue between the words that the author has given us, the poet has given us, and the meaning that we perceive and create from them and in them. So and I think that, once the words are on the page, they are a gift to the reader or readers, and the meaning does not reside, at least not exclusively, in the words. It resides in that dialectic between the reader and the words themselves. Some authors have generously made that very claim about their own poetry, including Robert Frost, who was always reluctant when asked, well, what do you mean, for instance, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep, which is the last couplet of Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. He wouldn't answer it because he didn't want to provide the answer. He wanted the meaning to reside in the liminal space between the words and the reader. It's one reason that I do like Bob Dylan so much, because Dylan also has resisted anytime he's asked, well, what do you mean by this? He just won't answer the question. So with that in mind, though, I think that at least the meaning I'm extracting from the text or reading into the text, extrapolation, interpolation, is that the kind of wisdom, the kind of life-supporting, life-sustaining, and life-giving blessing that Torah offers is more than just at the surface, which I think the rabbis associate with merely intellectual development. That there are levels of knowledge, Hebrew word da'at, that go well beyond growing a big brain. Abraham Joshua Heschel once said, when I was young, I admired people who were clever. Now that I am old, I admire people who are kind. And I think that there's something very consonant about that incredible statement and the text we're learning today, that the life-giving ability or capacity of Torah for the one who takes it seriously, it's not just that it will make you smarter or more clever. It will make you more human, or perhaps even more divine. And it may not cure your surface boo-boos, but it will address whatever malaise is deepest inside of you, marrow for your bones. Well, thanks, Dad, for zeroing in on that phrase. Russell also shares with us from Archibald MacLeish's Ars Poetica, for love, the leaning grasses and two lights above the sea, a poem should not mean, but be. Oh, that's great. Did you just know that? That's great. For love, the leaning grasses and two lights above the sea, a poem should not mean, but be. That's great. right? Poem is more than like a poem is more than just what does this mean? To reduce a poem to what do you mean is, I think, to do violence to the art, but that's beautiful. All right, moving on. The final proof text here propose. So now that we've got this structurally down, I think we can go a little bit more quickly through the rest. They are a graceful wreath upon your head, obviously meaning the words of wisdom, the words of Torah. So not only do they reach you in the innermost places, but they also become almost like a crown or a halo or a what is the next word? Adorn your head with a graceful wreath, crown you with a glorious diadem. So this is more than just about addressing what's on the inside. I think it's also suggesting it confers upon that person or those people an outward glory, regality, perhaps respect from one's peers. I don't know. Riches, honor, and finally, length of days, years of life, and peace. What do you make of all of these promises? Again, don't try and develop or propose a single literal read. Treat this like poetry, which Proverbs most certainly is. It's biblical poetry. And the rabbis are using it to make several claims about what a life of Torah provides for the one who takes it seriously. You know, Joe gave us the wonderful word meaning early on. And I think that's a piece of this, but I think there's a lot more now. So what are the other claims or promises that are made? Wreaths and necklaces and diadems and crowns, length of days, riches, honor, life, and peace. That's a lot. It's a lot of promises. What is there a governing theme? Is it intended to be cumulative and therefore bowl you over with what's happening here? Audrey, unmute yourself, please, before you speak. Great.
The riches and honors and the diadems, that sort of disturbed me because that's the antithesis of everything we've covered so far.
Right. And remember, thank you. And I really was hoping that somebody would say, what about the stuff we've covered so far? I mean, we spent most of our time last week. The main dialogue discussion that we had last week was around what is the interplay or what is the relationship? And I think we concluded, well, a tense one, between the spiritual reward, or sorry, the spiritual privation, full stop, the material privation that is associated with a true dedication to Torah. Like if you're going to study Torah, remember last week, you'll eat bread with salt, your water will be rationed, you're not going to have a nice house, you're going to be, it's going to be a kind of, meager subsistence kind of diet here. But oh, the spiritual riches. Here, Audrey's pointing out, well, here's a read that actually says, no, there is material reward, but maybe not, because it's poetry. Riches and honor and diadems and length of days may not only mean what they literally mean. That's my only way through it, is to say, well, there's nothing else in anything that we're reading today that suggests that the rabbis were reading any of this literally. Because we're already operating in a metaphorical frame, so it stands to reason. And I don't think I'm just issuing an apology for the text here. And by the way, it is okay if this text is inconsistent with the one that came before it. As Ralph Waldo Emerson famously wrote, adherence to a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, right? We make much too much of not flip-flopping, never changing one's mind, being internally consistent. I think it's for the birds. Just say two things that are total opposites and let people deal with it. In this case, though, you'll live a life of privation. No, you'll have rewards. One way to harmonize that apparent discordance is to say material privation, and that the riches, honor, and even length of days that are being spoken about here is spiritual reward, not physically. It won't cure you of cancer. So when we say it's marrow for your bones, Judaism elsewhere in the Talmud says if a person is sick, that person should see a doctor. That's a direct quote. That's a very Jewish teaching. Like, we don't believe that our faith and our spiritual practice heals physical ailments. So, Audrey, I'm simply lifting up your comment to point out that I think you're right to feel some cognitive dissonance around promises of what appear to be promises of material or physical well-being, longevity, wealth, what have you. And that if we want it to be harmonious with what's come before, then you have to read it metaphorically. Judy Gross.
It reminds me of the term enriched. I am enriched by our study. It brings me to a new level. I am enriched when I go into the sanctuary on a Friday night and the mundane slips away, and I am. So it's not exactly. It still has the richness, has some concretism to it, but it's more being enriched in your soul, as opposed to something concrete.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Mom, dad, mom.
And to follow up on what Judy said, I think this is sort of directed towards how do we recognize the people in the world that are worthy of respect?
Mm-hmm.
And it suggests that there are qualities that adhere to people that live a life by these words, right, that are recognizable in the world, and that, you know, it will be as if you were wearing the accoutrements of royalty. People will recognize this and give you the respect that it's due, not because you're, you know, a rap star, but because you're, you know, or because you live in a mansion, but because the values that you espouse in your life are those that are worthy of respect. And
how
you can gain this by a life of Torah.
How wonderfully and importantly countercultural that read is right now. I mean, you know, we have politicians who demand respect and admiration because of their self-declared power, celebrity, the fact that they have the biggest words or the biggest brains. And we have celebrities who wish for us to idolize them for all sorts of things that are, I would say, as far removed from what our tradition, at least here, esteems. Right? Who is deserving of honor in the Jewish tradition? Not the person, by the way, with the biggest brain. That is important too. And that's why I've taken such pains to explain that the language here and the proof texts that are used are about much more than acquisition of knowledge. Okay. By the way, an acquisition of knowledge, one could read the first 5 chapters of Pirkei Avot and say, the rabbi is the person who is really learned. But if it doesn't actually mold your character, if it doesn't actually get into the marrow of your bones and change who you are, you've missed what it's really all about. Whom does our tradition venerate? Not just the person who is smart, but the one who is wise. Big difference between the two. And I think a lot of us spend a lot of time emphasizing education, and we want our kids to be successful in ways that reinforce the need for the acquisition of knowledge. I am not as sure that we collectively, that our society, puts nearly as much emphasis on helping people learn to be wise, which I believe is a much more important, rewarding, and difficult project. So that's my sermon for today. And forgive me the leaning into a somewhat touchy political discourse, but you know, I'm beyond couching my words when it comes to the former president of the United States. I find him morally repugnant.
Yes.
And the fact that he the fact that he makes claims to his to deserving honor and respect and a big audience for anything other than what our tradition esteems.
Right.
Right. Our tradition venerates good ethical character and wisdom. And that's it. Okay, let's move on from there though. Michelle Braun, you're next.
So this is a decidedly modern spin on it, but reading this, I'm reminded to some of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And for those who did not study industrial psychology, industrial organization, it is, but Maslow, by the way, was Jewish, and he published this paper in 1940 something. And it is your nice regular pyramid where the bottom are your basic needs of food, water, shelter, and then builds to safety and a variety. And as somebody gets to those, the idea is as you get those taken care of, you can move on to that more to the top of the pyramid, the ultimate part of which is self-actualization. And I'm thinking this as an interpretation of self-actualization is not gems and material wealth, but it is this in your marrow, in your soul.
Yep. Love it. Right. It does come back to, no, I don't think it comes back to. I think it makes a statement that stands on its own. This Mishnah that we spent the entire lesson today quite appropriately unpacking is really a master statement about what our tradition values. And material riches just aren't it. And I think, Audrey, that might also be a response that, yes, you have this claim made that, yeah, a life of Torah, whatever that may mean, provides riches and honor. But in its context, I think it would be hard to back up the claim that it's talking about getting rich.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Arlene Goldsmith, I noticed that you unmuted yourself. So do you want to chime in here?
The only thing that I was going to say is I think that sometimes when riches is used in the context, for me, it's maybe a ploy to get people a little more interested in the content. But also I see it as something that that clearly can't be promised in any kind of a study format.
Right. And just so you think that, the former president of the United States is the only target of my ire, allow me to do a brief takedown of those evangelists, particularly televangelists and megachurch evangelists, who preach a so-called prosperity gospel. I don't know if you're familiar with that term. On your own time outside of class, Google prosperity gospel. It's very disturbing to me. It's basically, in my view, it is practiced by charlatans, and it's a form of spiritual hucksterism that promises that, if you just come to church and devote your faith in this direction, that God will make you rich. Right? That's what it's about.
And money. They ask for people to give them their money.
Right. That's right. Thank you. It's not just your faith and your prayers. You need to pay a lot to the church. And that if you are tithing to the church, significant percentages of your income, and if you're giving all your money to the church, it will come back to you in the form of material prosperity. In my view, this is both spiritually bankrupt would be a starting place, and it goes down from there. It's morally bankrupt. So, Joe Levine, chime in.
Am I okay? You hear me?
You're on. Yep.
Okay. I was thinking of references to our comments from you, from Barbara, from Doug, and from Judy Gross, all combined into one of the takeaways that I have. And we with references to poetry, the Torah as being some kind of poetry, and all the metaphors that we can, agree to, or at least see and align with. I come away with the idea that we each in our lives have some time when we're wearing a wreath and we are bedecked with jewels. And the takeaway I'm coming away with that is it has something to do with the wisdom and intelligence and being a good person. I think I think we can derive more. I think the richest man in the world is the one who is the kindest, because he is using in whatever intelligence he has in the right way. And that's my takeaway.
Love that. Love that. Very wise words. Michelle Braun, who wrote the quote, "Lord, who made the lion and the lamb, you decreed I should be what I am. Would it spoil some vast eternal plan if I were a wealthy man?" Is that Fiddler on the Roof?
That's Fiddler if I were a
Tevye,
rich man.
right? It's great. It's
Yeah.
great. Thought that was, I heard Tevye the dairyman. Yeah, it's like, would it be so bad? I've also gotten a private message to check out The Righteous Gemstones on HBO. Yeah, I need to do that still. Barbara, and then I'll take the concluding comment.
What comes to my mind is, where do we get the life of doing mitzvot?
Yeah, it's very interesting that Pirkei Avot is much more about, I mean, as a whole and at every granular level, it's much more about a life of Torah.
Right.
But
if you do the mitzvot, that brings the Messiah faster. I mean, so where does that come from?
Yeah, and I can't remember if it's in Avot. I'm not sure we looked at it, where there's I think it's in the Talmud. Maybe this would be a good one for our midwinter class, so we can come back to that, because it's one of the master questions, which is greater in Jewish tradition, learning or doing? Right? Mitzvot or Torah? Obviously, it's a false binary. The only good answer is both, though the rabbis do engage this debate and come up with a few different conjectures about which leads to the other more effectively. Right. Do we learn so that it becomes a goad to doing? Or if you get your hands into the doing of mitzvot, right? If you are both ritually observant, not particularly learned, but if you're ritually observant, if you are ethically attentive, if you're the kind of person who is volunteering time to help the poor and the aged and the sick and, what have you, that in and of itself will inspire you to learn Torah.
Well,
we can look at that.
What wasn't it in Torah that says we will do and then we will learn?
That is, of course, Alan, one of the texts that the rabbis use as a proof text in that debate. It says na'aseh v'nishma. Literally, we will do and we will hear, or we will heed, which the rabbis will use to say the doing comes before the understanding, right? If you want to train a child to live a Jewish life, it can't just be this removed intellectual exercise where it's like, okay, go to school, fill you up at WRT in the Jewish Learning Lab with Jewish gas, and that will power you for the rest of your Jewish life. It's the opposite. It's like you need to make a commitment to practice, to doing Jewish, and the learning will come. We'll get into that, but the proof text they use is exactly what the Jewish people said at Sinai. We will do, and we will heed in that order. Aaron.
Yeah, I think it would need to be another conversation, but where does intent fall into that? Because you can follow 613 mitzvot and you can read the Torah and you can still be a terrible human being.
Indeed. Yes. That would also be suitable for Talmud, to get into some of those. It's what I hope our Talmud study will do, help us really get into the ethical stuff and the sticky stuff that has modern applications and not just ritual purity. I mean, no diss on ritual purity, right? If that's your jam, great. It's not my jam. So, though there's much to learn, I love it for the learning and for the digressions. It's just that for me, it's not where I find my most meaningful Jewish practice is in ritual. It's some ritual. I will say that early in our Mishnah study, even before we started doing Pirkei Avot, so like 2 years ago when we started this project during COVID of learning online every week for several weeks at a time and then taking a little break, we did look at Mishnah Brachot, which talks about the interplay between prayer, the mechanical activity, and intention. And so certainly on the subject of prayer, not just any mitzvot, but the mitzvot associated with praying, the rabbis are very clear that although there are many rules and regulations for how to do it correctly, and that if one does it incorrectly, one has to go back or the prayer is invalid and all of this, nevertheless, the intention is what makes the prayer authentic and legitimate. And that to go through the prayer as a rote mechanical exercise without intention is not to pray at all. So yes, and that is only one of many dialogues in the rabbinic literature that touch on your exact question. Thank you, Barbara. Oh, unmute, Barbara. Yeah.
No,
Nope,
sorry.
there you are. Yep.
No, I didn't want
Okay.
to add to it.
Okay,
I
great.
understand.
Great. So we are at time. What an interesting rabbit hole this was to go down. Grateful for the time and attention and for putting up with the kind of crazy tangled web of proof text that we made our way through today. But I hope you learned something that expanded your intellectual capacity, but even more, I hope it gave you some something to chew on that could help you grow in wisdom and what they call discipline, like growing in character. I have put into the chat window a link to the Rosh Hashanah morning sermon written by Alexis Burke, my dear friend. It's must-see TV, so watch it. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. We're off next Thursday. We meet again 2 weeks from today on December 1st. And if we don't finish Pirkei Avot, then that's fine because we still have the 8th. That will be online learning. And I will keep us apprised of my hopes to come up with like a little siyum, a little party, a little brunch at the temple where we can celebrate our learning Pirkei Avot or our having learned Pirkei Avot as a community and have a little nash and maybe do a little learning too. So wonderful to spend this time with you. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.
If we sign off, how do we get that? How do we keep that video from your friend?
Oh, go to the chat window and just copy it. It's the one that says HTTPS.
HTTPS, you'll have it on now.
Vimeo.
Now, how do I copy it? What do you mean by copy?
Click on it. You don't even have to copy it. If you just click on it, it will open a window it will open a tab in your browser. And then
in my browser. Okay.
Yep.
The other thing is I'm committed to the service tomorrow night because the men's club is honor is doing the oneg. So I would really love to be at Rabbi Reese's installation. Is there any way we can, you think we after
I think it's being streamed and recorded. And I
good.
can find that out. And if it is, I can make sure that you receive it. So yes, if I don't see you tomorrow night in person, I'll do what I can to get you a link so that you can see the installation.
Because I love that kid. He's great.
Can we,
Me too.
can we all
Thank you
have
so
a-
much.
Thanks.
Yashikar.
Yeah.
Can we all have a link? I'd love to see it too.
What, the sermon link?
No, well, I'd like that.
Yeah,
yes,
no,
but
I'll send it in my missive. I'll try and get that out with a recording of today's class before Shabbat.
That would
for
be
the-
wonderful.
Yeah, from Natalie.
Rabbi Rice's
Yeah, exactly.
introduction.
Thanks.
Over to me.
All right, everyone.
Happy
Ciao. Great
holidays.
to see y'all. Bye.
Bye.